What if the moment you walk away from someone who drained you is the exact moment they realize they've lost everything? What if the person who treated you as replaceable suddenly discovers you were their entire emotional support system? And what if psychology has already explained why this happens? Today, we're breaking down what Carl Jung's ideas reveal about toxic dynamics and why an empath walking away isn't weakness, it's power. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're diving deep into the psychology behind toxic relationships, emotional dependency, and what truly happens when an empath finally decides they've had enough. Carl Jung believed that not all relationships are built on connection. Some are built on extraction. That means one person is giving energy, patience, love, and emotional labor, while the other is taking, consuming, and avoiding their own inner work. In many toxic dynamics, the empath becomes the emotional processor of the relationship. They absorb anger and respond with calm. They absorb criticism and respond with understanding. They absorb chaos and try to create stability. At first, it feels like love. It feels like loyalty. It even feels heroic. But psychologically, something much deeper is happening. Jung talked about the shadow self. This is the part of us that holds our insecurities, fears, shame, anger, and unresolved wounds. Healthy people acknowledge their shadow and work through it. Toxic individuals often avoid it. Instead of facing their darkness, they project it onto someone else. Projection is when a person attributes their own flaws, fears, or failures to another person. If they feel inadequate, they call you inadequate. If they feel guilty, they accuse you. If they feel empty, they say you're not enough. And this is where the empath becomes incredibly valuable to them. Empaths don't just tolerate emotional projection, they try to heal it. They believe that with enough love, patience, and understanding, the other person can change. They become emotional alchemists. They take cruelty and respond with compassion. They take distance and respond with reassurance. They take broken behavior and try to fix it. Over time, this creates a psychological dependency. The toxic person doesn't have to grow. They don't have to self-reflect. They don't have to face their shadow. The empath is doing the emotional work for both of them. This dynamic can feel intense and addictive. There are highs and lows. There are dramatic apologies. There are promises of change. There are moments of deep vulnerability followed by repeated harm. Jung described certain unhealthy bonds as parasitic symbiosis. One person feeds off the emotional energy of another while offering very little in return. To the toxic individual, the empath feels irreplaceable, but they don't consciously realize it. Instead, they treat them as if they are endlessly available. They assume the empath will stay. They assume forgiveness is guaranteed. They assume love is unconditional, and that assumption becomes their greatest mistake. Because when the empath finally walks away, something shatters. It's not just the loss of a partner, it's the collapse of their emotional infrastructure. While the empath was present, the toxic person had someone managing the emotional climate of the relationship, someone initiating hard conversations, someone smoothing conflicts, someone remembering important dates, someone offering encouragement when they felt insecure. They had stability without earning it. When that stability disappears, they are left alone with their own unresolved emotions. Jung believed that when projection no longer has a target, the individual is forced to confront themselves, and that confrontation can feel like ego death. Ego death doesn't mean physical harm. It means the collapse of the false identity someone built to protect themselves. The toxic person may have seen themselves as powerful, in control, superior, or misunderstood, but without the empath validating them, that image starts to crack. They lose their mirror. Empaths often reflect back potential. They see who someone could become. They believe in growth, even when there's little evidence of it. When that belief is withdrawn, the toxic individual loses not just a relationship, but the version of themselves that someone believed in. At first, they don't process it calmly. The usual pattern follows. Denial, they assume the empath will come back. Rage, they blame the empath for abandoning them. Manipulation, they attempt love bombing, sudden apologies, promises of therapy, dramatic messages about change. But here's the key insight. Most of this isn't transformation, it's panic. It's the fear of losing their emotional supply. Jung emphasized that real change requires conscious integration of the shadow. It requires accountability, humility, and discomfort. Quick promises made in desperation are rarely genuine integration. If the empath stays gone, the toxic individual eventually encounters something Jung described as the void. The void is the uncomfortable silence where distraction used to be. It's the empty space where someone else used to absorb your emotions. There's no one left to blame, no one to project onto, no one to manage the chaos. And for someone who has avoided self-reflection for years, this silence can be terrifying. Now, here's an important point. This doesn't mean the empath was perfect. It doesn't mean the toxic person is beyond hope. Psychology isn't about labeling people as villains. It's about understanding patterns. And the pattern here is emotional outsourcing. The toxic individual outsourced emotional regulation, validation, and growth to the empath. The empath outsourced their self-worth to being needed. When the empath walks away, they reclaim their energy. They stop trying to fix someone who refuses to fix themselves. This is what makes walking away powerful. It's not revenge, it's completion. Jung believed that growth happens when we integrate painful experiences rather than repeat them. When an empath reaches their breaking point, it's often after countless chances, repeated forgiveness, and deep internal conflict. By the time they leave, they've already processed the grief. They're not dramatic, they're done. And that finality is something many toxic individuals underestimate. They confuse kindness with weakness. They confuse patience with permanence. They confuse empathy with endless tolerance. But empathy has limits. Once those limits are crossed enough times, the empath shifts from trying to heal the relationship to protecting themselves. And when they do, the dynamic changes forever. The toxic person may move on quickly, they may find someone new, they may repeat the same patterns, but here's what psychology suggests. Without genuine shadow work, patterns repeat. The new person may not tolerate the behavior. The new person may not absorb projection. The new person may not provide unconditional acceptance. And that's when the comparison begins, not necessarily out of love, but out of loss. Loss of stability, loss of unconditional positive regard, loss of someone who saw light in them despite the darkness. Jung highlighted that certain connections act as catalysts for transformation. They offer an invitation to evolve, but transformation is a choice. If that invitation is rejected repeatedly, eventually it expires. When an empath leaves, they're not closing the door out of hatred, they're closing it because staying would mean abandoning themselves, and self-abandonment is not love. From a psychological perspective, the most devastating loss for a toxic individual isn't the person, it's the opportunity. The opportunity to grow with someone who believed in them, the opportunity to heal with support, the opportunity to integrate their shadow with compassion beside them. When that opportunity is gone, the responsibility becomes fully theirs, and that's heavy. So what's the real lesson here? If you identify as an empath, understand that your ability to love deeply is powerful, but it should not come at the cost of your mental health. Compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. And if you recognize toxic patterns in yourself, the most courageous move isn't chasing someone who left, it's looking inward. Jung's work teaches us that wholeness comes from integration, not dependency. No one can heal your shadow for you. No one can carry your emotional weight forever. And no one is obligated to stay while you avoid your own growth. When an empath leaves, it may feel like a loss to the toxic person, but in many cases, it's also the first real opportunity for self-awareness. Whether they take that opportunity is up to them. But for the empath, walking away is not the end of love, it's the beginning of self-respect. And sometimes the most powerful transformation doesn't happen in the person who was left, it happens in the one who finally chose themselves.